Welcome to the dystopian circus, where the clowns run the asylum and the audience is expected to clap along like trained seals. We live in an era where facts are offensive, criminals are freedom fighters, and government employees are shocked that they actually have to prove they deserve a paycheck. The media, once the self-appointed guardians of truth, are now so untrustworthy, even AOC is confused. People don't buy their lies anymore.
I asked a lot of Trump voters and asked about Trump voters in my district. I did this online, but we actually went door-to-door canvassing as well. And when I asked people, where do you get your news from? Who do you trust? Increasingly, people are saying, I want to hear from the politician themselves.
Yeah.
And that they will believe what that politician says more than what the media says about that politician. And so when Trump says, we're not going to deport you, we're only going after the quote unquote like rapists and murderers, which, by the way, is already standing U.S. law. But when he says that, people believe him. And what you do with when a lot of people believe a liar is a tricky scenario in which we find ourselves. People used to trust media outlets more than they trusted politicians. And so, but then that credibility has eroded over time. And so what we do about that, this is the soil in which misinformation flourishes, in which, strong men can just say their things and people will just believe.
AOC wants you to believe that Trump supporters blindly trust him, while the real problem, the media's total credibility collapse, is just some unfortunate accident that happened over time. No mention of why, no reflection on how the media burned itself to the ground with years of hoaxes, selective outrage, and outright fabrications. Just a vague hand wave. Oops, credibility eroded. Who knows how? Like a kid standing in front of a burned down house saying, I don't know, fires just happen sometimes. And yet the numbers don't lie, unlike CNN. Trust in the mass media has hit record lows. According to Gallup, only 32% of Americans have any confidence in the press to report the news fairly. That's the same number as in 2016, which is when the media went all in on the Russia collusion hoax, like a gambling addict betting the house on a busted flush. Even better, a Pew study found that 55% of journalists openly admit that not every side deserves equal coverage. Translation, we decide who gets to be the hero and who gets the villain at it. This is why the press will write a 5,000-word sob story about a fentanyl dealer with neck tattoos while calling a guy who just wants lower taxes a far-right extremist. So yeah, people are done with him. Now let's talk about the big claim here, that Trump is a liar and his supporters are blind idiots who believe everything he says. First of all, projection much? The people who still think Jussie Smollett was attacked by roving MAGA gangs at 2 a.m. in sub-zero Chicago temperatures should probably sit this one out. The truth is, people don't trust Trump because they think he's infallible. They trust him because they know the media is worse. Think about it. These are the same geniuses who told you that Hunter Biden's laptop was a Russia disinformation campaign, that inflation was transitory, and that the border was secure, while migrants were live streaming their crossings like it was a YouTube travel vlog. But sure, Trump's the liar. Now let's talk about AOC's sleight of hand here. She throws in the phrase, quote unquote, rapists and murderers, trying to downplay the fact that yes, criminals, real, actual, violent criminals are the priority for deportation. It's like someone putting air quotes around serial killer when discussing Ted Bundy. But her wording is designed to make Trump sound like he's just pulling scary words out of a hat. Meanwhile, the actual statistics show that illegal immigrants do commit crimes at significant rates, especially in sanctuary cities where enforcement has been turned into a spectator sport. But sure, enforcing basic immigration law is authoritarian. Maybe if ICE agents wore drag, the left would support them. And let's not forget the absurdity of the sanctuary city argument. The media insists these policies make everyone safer, unless you're one of the unlucky people who gets murdered by a violent offender that should have been deported. Like in 2018, when the twice-deported illegal immigrant in California was released because of sanctuary laws and immediately went on a shooting spree, killing 2 and wounding others. That's not a hypothetical, that's reality, but I guess that's just the price of compassion. And here's where it gets even better. AOC is whining that people want to hear from politicians directly rather than filtering everything through the media. You don't say. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that journalists have spent years taking Trump's words and twisting them beyond recognition. He could say good morning, and the New York Times would run a front page story about how mornings are now problematic. People aren't rejecting journalism. They're rejecting a propaganda machine that has all the subtlety of a North Korean press release. And then we get the final boss level of irony. AOC warns that this is how misinformation flourishes and how strong men rise. Oh, you mean like when the media spent 4 years screeching that Trump was an authoritarian who would never leave office, only for him to walk out the door peacefully while Democrats turned D.C. into a militarized fortress with 25,000 National Guard troops? Or when they called anyone who questioned the 2020 election a threat to democracy while they themselves spent 4 years pretending 2016 was rigged by Vladimir Putin? Or when they promised us the border was secure while thousands poured in daily like it was Black Friday at Walmart? Or when they told us that Joe Biden didn't have any sort of cognitive issues, that his mental health wasn't declining, and that the old man was all there, even though we saw him stumbling and fumbling like an idiot? Yeah, I don't think we believe any of that. If you want to know why people trust politicians more than journalists, it's because journalists stopped doing their job. The press decided activism was more important than honesty. Narrative was more important than facts. And propaganda was more important than reporting. And now they're clutching their pearls, wondering why people aren't buying what they're selling. AOC's entire rant is just a desperate attempt to deflect from the fact that the left's monopoly on information is crumbling. People aren't brainwashed. They're just tired of being gaslit by the same people who told them that men can get pregnant. And speaking of tantrums, over at the United Nations, they are not happy that the corrupt slush fund known as USAID has been dismantled.
We have 5,000 public health worker contracts that are funded by U.S. assistance, and all of these in all regions of Ethiopia have been terminated. And 10,000 data clerks, very important in Ethiopia, so that we continue monitoring and ensuring that people are on treatment. So as UNAIDS, we estimate that if PEPFAR wasn't reauthorized between 2025 and 2029, and other resources were not found for the HIV response, there would be a 400% increase in AIDS death. That's 6.3 million people, 6.3 million AIDS-related deaths that will occur in future.
Ah, yes, the classic UN guilt trip, because nothing screams responsible governance like telling Americans that if they don't keep forking over billions of their tax dollars, millions of people will die. No mention, of course, of how these governments manage their own resources, why the wealthiest African nations aren't stepping up, or how much of this money actually helps versus lining the pockets of corrupt officials. Just give us more money or you're heartless murderers. So let's break this down. The claim here is that if the U.S. stops funding PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, there will be a 400% increase in AIDS deaths, totaling 6.3 million over a 4-year period. Sounds horrifying, right? But notice the weasel words: if no other resources were found for the HIV response. Translation: if the U.S. stops paying and literally no one else does anything, then yes, things will be bad. So the UN, which loves to lecture America on equity, is admitting that its entire aid strategy hinges on the continued generosity of American taxpayers. Is that what's happening right now? Mind you, that this is the same UN that constantly criticizes the U.S. for being greedy and selfish, except when it comes time to pick up the check. And let's not pretend like every dollar of this aid goes directly to treatment. Between bloated bureaucracies, corruption, and mismanagement, a large chunk of these funds disappear into the abyss of administrative costs. According to a 2020 study by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, mismanagement and inefficiencies have plagued USAID for decades, with billions lost to waste and corruption. Meanwhile, countries like China and Russia, who love to flex their influence in Africa, aren't exactly lining up to pay the bill. Where's their PEPFAR? Why is it always the U.S. that's expected to bankroll the world while being told we're the bad guys? Maybe if Ethiopia and other nations prioritize their own public health over their latest vanity projects or sweetheart deals with China, they wouldn't be in a perpetual financial hostage situation. And let's not forget, the UN has an amazing track record of botching public health initiatives. You know, like when UN peacekeepers brought a cholera outbreak to Haiti that killed over 10,000 people. Remember that? Or when they've been caught covering up rampant sexual abuse scandals among their own workers. Oh yeah, that happened. But sure, let's trust them on AIDS prevention with more unchecked funding. The reality is, if PEPFAR funding ends, the responsibility should be on these nations to step up and find new solutions, whether through their own budgets, private sector partnerships, or dare I say, assistance from other global powers who claim to care so much about global equity. America has done more than enough. Maybe it's time for the rest of the world to start pulling their own weight. Shifting gears to Cynthia Nixon, who delivered one of the most bizarre speeches in defense of child transitions that you will ever see.
I am here today as the mother of a proud trans man. I am here today as the aunt of a proud trans man. My best friend's kid is trans, and my kid's best friend is trans. My wife and I, our lives are filled with the most amazing, beautiful, brave trans people, young and old, but especially young. My trans kid had his top surgery at NYU a number of years ago. His doctors were fantastic. His surgeon was the best we could have imagined. And the idea that this city is filled with young people who thought they had a place to go where they could receive the highest care, and that place has now been shut to them, sickens me to my core.
Cynthia Nixon, who last I checked was famous for talking about shoes on Sex and the City and not for her expertise in medicine or child psychology, has decided she's an authority on permanently altering children's bodies. And her big argument that the sheer number of trans people in her personal life somehow proves that child gender transitions are necessary and good. Now let's pause for a second and acknowledge how mathematically ridiculous this claim is. Nixon says her kid is trans, her niece is trans, her best friend's kid is trans, and her kid's best friend is trans. Oh, and her whole life is apparently just crawling with trans people, essentially young ones. That's not representation, that's a pandemic. If you took these numbers at face value, you'd think gender dysphoria was more contagious than COVID at a Fauci book signing. The most generous estimates say trans-identifying people make up about 0.6% of adults and 1.4% of minors, but somehow Nixon's social circle is batting closer to 50%. Either she lives in some magical trans dimension, or, and hear me out, kids in her elite progressive bubble are being coached into this ideology like it's a new trend. And that brings us to the real horror story here. The mass social experiment being run on confused minors. Nixon frames Trump's executive order as some kind of medieval witch hunt, when in reality it's about stopping kids from being permanently mutilated before they're old enough to even drive a car. We don't let 15-year-olds get tattoos because they might regret them, but double mastectomies? Oh, those are just fine. You want blue hair? Sure, go nuts. You want your uterus removed? Welcome to progressive paradise. And let's not skip the absolute dystopian nightmare of her bragging about her child's top surgery at NYU. Imagine proudly announcing on stage that you paid for your underage daughter to get her breasts surgically removed like it's a trip to Disneyland. The surgeon was fantastic, she says. Oh, I bet. Business is booming. The American medical industry has found a lifetime patient pipeline. Take a confused kid, convince them they need hormones for life, slice them up, and keep cashing in when their body inevitably starts breaking down. And the best part, if they regret it, too bad. Their healthy body parts are in a biohazard bin somewhere now. Meanwhile, actual medical professionals in Europe are backtracking hard. The UK shut down its biggest gender clinic because they found it was pushing kids into transition without proper psychological evaluation. Sweden, Finland, and Norway have banned child transitions because of the overwhelming evidence of harm. But sure, the American healthcare system, which, let's not forget, prescribed opioids like they were vitamins, totally has this under control. And Nixon says it sickens her to her core that some gender clinics in New York are shutting down. What should sicken people is the skyrocketing number of detransitioners, young adults who were railroaded into medical transitions only to realize too late that they were sold a lie. Chloe Cole was put on puberty blockers at 13, had her breasts removed at 15, and now at 19, she's speaking out about how she was butchered by a system that treated her dysphoria like a marketing opportunity. But don't expect Nixon and her activist friends to acknowledge people like Chloe, because detransitioners are the inconvenient evidence that proves they were catastrophically wrong. And here's the kicker. The same people who scream that 18-year-olds aren't mature enough to own a gun or that 21-year-olds shouldn't be trusted with alcohol are somehow totally fine with 13-year-olds making irreversible body-altering decisions based on Tumblr posts and TikTok videos. We don't let kids sign contracts, join the military, or rent a car because they don't have the judgment for it. But making themselves lifelong medical patients, oh, that's just fine because it aligns with the current social agenda of the left. Nixon's speech isn't about science. It's not about helping kids. It's about ideological virtue signaling and protecting an industry that is making billions off of permanently altering children. And when the lawsuits start rolling in from the thousands of young adults who were duped into making these decisions before they even finished puberty, will Nixon and her activist crowd take responsibility, or will they pretend they never saw this coming? Methinks it may be the latter. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the anti-deportation protests are still going on, and they are as friendly as ever, just like a George Floyd riot.
Now at 1:30, back to breaking news out of downtown LA, where a large group of students are marching in protest against President Trump's immigration policies.
A fight has just broken out. Let's go back to Rich Prickett. He's overhead in Sky 5. Rich, what's going on?
Yeah, Glenn and Lou, just moments ago, what was a peaceful protest is now turned into a scuffle. We're seeing, looks like at least one person that's bleeding there after removing a shirt. We saw a couple of the protesters that were throwing punches at one another and then chasing each other down in the street, and then now it's spread into Grand Park here. But looks like at least one of those protesters, who we believe are all students from various high schools here in the Los Angeles area, have gotten together. So again, this just happening minutes ago.
I mean, do you see any police officers even getting close to this right now?
I would have to look out the window here, Glenn. Give me just 1 second. I don't right this second, but again, this just happening within the last couple of minutes. So if this is creating the attention that of what we just saw, I would imagine that some law enforcement presence would be necessary over here. But you can see some of the students that are trying to break up any more engagement here.
Isn't it great to see another mostly peaceful protest turn into a street brawl? Who could have seen that one coming? It's always the same pattern, folks. Activists march out claiming moral superiority, screaming about injustice, and then within an hour, fists are flying, people are getting chased through the streets, and someone's getting stabbed. But remember, folks, these are just students fighting for justice. It's totally different when they're the ones committing the violence. Now let's start by talking about the glaringly obvious here. This protest was against Trump's immigration policies, specifically ICE enforcing the law. And what happens? The protest devolves into an all-out melee where high school students are chasing each other down, throwing punches, and someone winds up bleeding in the middle of a park. And we're supposed to believe that these are the people advocating for a better, safer, more just society. They can't even make it through an afternoon protest without turning on each other like a pack of wild dogs. And what about the media coverage? The reporter keeps trying to reassure us that this was a peaceful protest, right up until it suddenly wasn't. They call it a scuffle, a fight, a scattered incident, as if we're watching a little playground disagreement rather than a full-on street battle that ended with a stabbing. But wait, no one's sure how this person ended up bleeding because the camera just happened to lose track of things when the violence started. Convenient. It's like watching a nature documentary where the narrator politely skips over the part where the lion tears a gazelle in half. And where's law enforcement? Nowhere to be found, because in Los Angeles, the police know better than to interfere with an anti-ICE protest unless they want their mayor throwing them under the bus by dinner time. So instead, we get a scene where a group of teenagers are pouring water over a bleeding victim while waiting for paramedics to maybe show up. It's the perfect encapsulation of modern left-wing activism. Cause chaos, refuse to take accountability, and then expect someone else to clean up your mess. And the cherry on top, the sheer irony of people protesting immigration enforcement while engaging in the kind of violence that justifies why we have immigration enforcement in the first place. You'd think if you were trying to make a case that ICE is the real problem, you wouldn't be out here stabbing people at your rally. But hey, self-awareness has never been the left's strong suit. And in our next clip, we have a Mexican who tore down an American flag and replaced it with a Mexico flag in American soil and then threatened to off the police. Wow, what a day.
You're not gonna tell me what to do. This is Mexican land. Oh, okay. Look at that flag, because that flag isn't on the floor, is it? Hey. Is it? Hey. You can't say I'm disrespecting. No, esta es mi tierra. Esta es mi tierra. Esta es mi tierra. Come here. Okay, my people kill you. Turn around. I'm going in peace and you're hurting me and you're gonna regret it when you, okay. Hey. Touch me, my when your kids die. When your kids die, you're squishing my hand and they already know. You don't need to take me. Stop her. Take me. Take me. Take me. Take her down. Take me.
She's all right. We'll get her. Stop. All this happening this morning around 9:30. The Kern County Sheriff's Office says 24-year-old Crystal Aguilar cut the chain securing the flagpole at the entrance to the park, removed the American flag, threw it into the mud, and replaced it with the flag of Mexico. When park rangers attempted to detain Aguilar, she responded with a slew of threats. She was taken into custody and booked into jail on several charges, including threatening a peace officer, vandalism, and resisting arrest.
Here we go again. Peaceful activism at its finest. Cutting down the American flag, tossing it in the mud, hoisting up a foreign flag on American soil, and then threatening to kill cops and their kids. Nothing says, I deserve to be in this country, like openly disrespecting it and promising violence against law enforcement. But don't worry, I'm sure this will be spun as some brave resistance against oppression rather than what it actually is, unhinged criminal behavior. First, this isn't protest. This is clear-cut vandalism, criminal threats, and outright treasonous behavior. If someone had done this in Mexico, ripped down their flag, replaced it with an American one, and then started screaming death threats at police, how do you think that would have played out? Spoiler alert, Mexican authorities don't tolerate this kind of nonsense. Try pulling this stunt in any country south of the border and see how long you last before you're really squished. And let's talk about that deranged, foaming at the mouth rant Aguilar went on while being arrested. My people kill you, and when your kids die, oh yeah, real model immigrant behavior right there. This isn't some harmless activist making a point about cultural pride. This is an unhinged lunatic literally threatening murder while pretending to be the victim. I'm going in peace, she says, right after threatening to kill cops. I guess peace means something different in her world. But here's a real kicker. Why is this even a debate? Why is it controversial to say that people who openly hate this country, disrespect its symbols, and threaten its citizens should not be here? This isn't complicated. The American flag is not optional if you live in America. You don't get to desecrate it, replace it with another country's, and then claim moral superiority. This isn't your homeland. If Mexico is so sacred to you, then by all means, go to Mexico. Enjoy it. And yet we all know how this is going to play out. Some activist group will swoop in crying about systemic oppression and over-policing while completely ignoring the fact that she threatened to murder police officers and their children. The media will downplay the threats, turn this into some passionate act of defiance, and probably blame Trump somehow. Meanwhile, if an American even slightly disrespects another country's flags, riots, arrests, condemnations from world leaders. The double standard is as predictable as it is infuriating. Further, the claim that California is stolen Mexican land ignores basic history. Mexico lost it fair and square in a war they started and then signed it away in a treaty. Here's a brief history lesson for all the leftists out there. In 1846, after years of tension, Mexico provoked war with the U.S. by attacking American troops in Texas, leading to the Mexican-American War. The U.S. proceeded to wipe the floor with Mexico, winning every major battle, marching into Mexico City and forcing them to surrender. The war ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, where Mexico voluntarily ceded California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and several other territories in exchange for $15 million, a sum they willingly accepted rather than continuing to fight. The U.S. even took on $3.25 million of Mexico's debt, making the deal even sweeter for them. Mexico wasn't robbed. They lost a war they initiated, got paid for the land, and legally handed it over. Claiming California is stolen is like a gambler whining that the casino stole their money after they lost every hand. You played, you lost, you signed the deed, game over. get over it. Bottom line, this whole situation isn't about freedom of speech. This is about respecting the country you're in. If you can't even tolerate the sight of the American flag, you have no business being in America. And if your first instinct is to scream death threats at cops while playing the victim, then maybe, just maybe, this country isn't for you. Next up, we have federal employees having meltdowns over those holding them accountable for literally not showing up to work and having their positions threatened because of it.
I was nervous and reticent to come up here and speak just for retaliation purposes. I just wanted to share some things that are going on at my agency. In the last week, we had Elon Musk in our building, and after he visited the building, for a 50% cut of the entire agency. My colleagues are getting 15-minute one-on-one check-ins with 19, 20, and 21-year-old college graduates asking to justify their existence. Supervisors are being told not to tell their staff anything, withhold information, and today we got word that supervisors must now fill out a justification form and that there's going to be just a 30% rank and yank with all staff of my agency. And to top it all off, one of Musk's top lieutenants and his wife and young child have shacked up on the 6th floor of our agency and are living there. The hallway's been blocked off with a special access list for people who can't get back there. Queer and trans folks of my agency are being doxxed in public, their lives threatened.
Oh, the horror of government employees finally being held accountable for their jobs. The absolute injustice of being asked to justify your existence in a bloated, taxpayer-funded bureaucracy. You mean to tell me that federal workers who have been coasting on guaranteed paychecks for decades, doing God knows what, are suddenly being asked, hey, what exactly do you do here? And they don't have a clear answer? Yeah, I can see why they're panicking. Let's be real. The federal government is notorious for inefficiency, redundancy, and wasting billions of taxpayer dollars. The idea that agencies should be above scrutiny is laughable. A 2018 Government Accountability Office report found that the federal government spends over $137 billion annually on duplication, fragmentation, and overlap, meaning entire agencies exist just to repeat work that's already being done elsewhere. Musk comes in, takes one look at the circus, and says, yeah, half of this can go, and suddenly it's oppression. And the biggest grievance here that 19-year-olds, yes, fresh college grads, are the ones asking the tough questions. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't these the same people who told us for 4 years kids are wise enough to determine their gender, vote at 16, and lead climate protests with zero life experience, calling Greta Thunberg? But the moment a 19-year-old dares to ask a government worker, so, what exactly do you do all day, bro? Suddenly, they're too young to have an opinion. Got it. And then we get the real kicker, the sob story about queer and trans employees being doxxed. What does that have to do with anything? Was it Musk? Was it part of the job review process? Or is this just another way to pivot away from the real issue? That people with cushy, untouchable government jobs are finally being put under the microscope. Every time the left doesn't want to defend their policies, they throw in a vague claim about threats or harassment as a distraction. Bottom line, the people screeching the loudest about these job cuts are the ones who know they can't justify their paychecks. If your job actually mattered, you wouldn't be worried about explaining why it exists. If it doesn't, then congratulations. You're finally experiencing what the rest of real hardworking Americans deal with in the real world. And in related news, Democrats, also known as the party of corruption, absolutely lost their shit when they realized they weren't going to be able to bring their two-ring circus of a protest into the Department of Education.
Ask the question again. That's important.
Were you told, are you making this decision to stand in front of this door on your own behalf, on behalf of the Department of Education, or were you told to come out here and block members of Congress and go at the desk?
I'm doing my job.
So everybody's
what is that?
We're doing our jobs.
We're trying to save you.
It's a non-responsive.
Show them your ID. Were you told to stand here, or did you decide to stand here and block members of Congress from entering the Department of Education?
To federal buildings.
We're allowed in there.
So a private security contractor
do you know who members of Congress are?
Members of Congress.
We're all members of Congress.
Maybe he doesn't understand.
A private security contractor is making the decision to block members of Congress from a public access entrance.
I don't think he knows.
You have the authority as a private security contractor to block members of Congress. That has been knighted and granted to you.
You have to at least let us go to the desk.
Yeah. Sending the goons out. Oh my, look at that.
Who told you to do this? Open the door.
I see you now. So do you understand who members of Congress are?
I got it, yeah.
Well, and you don't care. Who are we then?
I got the job right there.
You don't care.
We have a job to do.
We're not dangerous people. We're not, I don't know, security. There are no thieves and thugs out here. We're members of Congress. We're parents. We're teachers.
Each of us.
There's our ID, right there.
We were elected to do that.
This might be the greatest display of not giving a single care ever recorded on camera. Imagine being a Democrat. You've spent your whole career throwing tantrums about defunding the police, screeching about abolishing ICE, and demanding that security just step aside for protesters, read rioters. And now suddenly you're furious that a security guard won't let you in the building. The entitlement is off the charts. And let's just take a moment to appreciate this legendary Doge security guy. Not only does he not care who these people are, but he barely acknowledges their existence. They're standing there demanding access, pulling the classic, "Do you even know who I am?" routine. And his answer is, "I got a job to do, bro." That's it. Absolute king behavior. Meanwhile, Democrats keep trying to rephrase their demands as if they just need to unlock the right combination of words for him to suddenly start bowing down to their presence. Do you understand who members of Congress are? Yeah, buddy, he understands. He's seeing a bunch of you in front of him whining. He just doesn't care. And that's what's driving them insane. By the way, it should be noted that now Democrats suddenly care about their jobs. Now it's all, we were elected to do this, and we have a duty. This is our job. Give me a break. These are the same people who spend half their time on MSNBC, the other half tweeting performative outrage, and somehow still find time to grandstand in front of cameras pretending to be martyrs. When it's about pushing radical policies, wasting taxpayer money, or ignoring actual crises, they have no problem shirking responsibility. But the second they're locked out of a building, suddenly it's the will of the people that they be let in. If their job is to throw public tantrums while achieving nothing, then sure, they're crushing it. But if they're trying to claim that blocking security guards and whining into a megaphone is some noble act of democracy, it's beyond laughable. And the funniest part? These same politicians spend their days mocking security guards, law enforcement, and border patrol agents. But the moment a private security guard doesn't roll out the red carpet for them, they act like they're being oppressed. Welcome to reality, folks. Maybe next time, don't spend years demonizing the people who actually enforce law and order.
Oh, wow.
You're securing this building against who?
Members of Congress.
Who is the Congress? Who are you protecting?
It's members of the people.
So this is the beginning of full transparency of this administration.
That's right.
The administration that talked about they're going to open the doors to all of these things and show the American public what is going on. They won't even open the door to this building, to members of Congress. We are not posing any threat here. We are not dangerous people. We have not done anything. We're trying to request a meeting, and they have a private security contractor who on his own is making decisions on behalf of the Department of Education.
We are members of Congressman Hayes, what you're saying is they allow billionaires and his minions to come in
I don't
to
know
this
who
building.
he is. I don't know who he is, but I know who I am. And I'm a member of Congress with oversight responsibilities trying to request a meeting, and a private security contractor is not allowing me to enter the building.
They allow billionaires to go in this building, but not the people's representatives. They allow billionaires and their cronies to go in, but not, there's a lack of transparency here. The members of Congress, the people's representatives are not allowed in. This is not transparent.
They're locking our kids out. Well, not only are they not letting us in, now they've called the Department of Homeland Security. We are members of Congress here to talk with the Department of Education, and they're treating us.
The kids deserve to have us go in and fight for them.
This is appalling.
Children of this country deserve that battle.
This is a public institution. This is not Russia.
The absolute phoniness of this whole spectacle is Oscar-worthy. It's like watching a movie starring Juicy Smollett, where every line is overacted, every emotion is fake, and the script is so laughably bad that even extras look embarrassed to be there. You've got Democrats pretending to be oppressed while standing outside a government building they've had unrestricted access to for decades, screeching about transparency, like they didn't just spend years backing censorship, secret hearings, and FBI raids on political opponents. The fake outraged, the forced drama, the "this is not Russia" line, chef's kiss. It's pure political theater, except instead of a blockbuster, it's a low-budget flop that no one wants to watch. And the best part, the sheer irony of them crying about billionaires and their minions getting access to government buildings. Excuse me? The same people who rake in millions from tech giants, corporate lobbyists, and Wall Street elites now want to act like they're the voice of the people? Spare us. The only reason they're outraged is that, for once in their careers, the rules are actually applied to them equally.
This man here, contractor.
We are members of Congress.
Come in.
They're blocking
us. I want you to
us.
see this man here, who is a federal employee. He told us.
No, he's not.
Are you a federal employee?
No.
Huh?
Yes.
No, he said he's a federal employee. We pay him. We raise money to make sure that we have a Department of Education. Everybody that's hired at the Department of Education are here because we pay for them to be here. He's standing here today, blocking the door, and he can't give us a good reason why he's blocking this door.
Make sure they see right here, all access entrance.
We just got to witness the classic Maxine Waters playbook, a calculated mix of public shaming, entitlement, and vindictive intimidation, masquerading as holding the government accountable. She's not just asking to be let in, she's publicly singling out this man, naming him as the villain and putting a massive target on his back. She knows exactly what she's doing. This isn't about transparency or justice. It's about forcing compliance through humiliation and ensuring that even if she doesn't get what she wants in the moment, this guy will pay for it later. She frames him as an enemy of democracy, loudly repeating that taxpayers fund his salary, a classic power move meant to strip him of any authority in the public eye. She's trying to make him look like an insubordinate servant who dares to defy the ruling class because, in her mind, that's what she is. She's entitled to get in because she's Maxine Waters. And if she doesn't get her way, she's going to turn this nameless employee into a national punching bag. And here's the most insidious part. She's making him the face of what Democrats are framing as authoritarian lack of transparency in the Trump administration. She knows this moment will go viral. She knows activists and media lapdogs will amplify the outrage, and that this guy will get harassed, doxxed, and possibly even threatened for simply doing his job. It's vindictive, it's cruel, and it's absolutely calculated. So it should be clear that what Democrats are attempting to do here is an oversight. It's mob incitement wrapped up in righteous indignation. She's not fighting the system. She is the system. She built the kind of bloated, overreaching government that blocks people from doing things, and now she's just mad that it finally inconvenienced her for once.
Look them in the eye. Come on, hold your face up. Look at him. Let him see you. This is him. Look at it. What's your name? Tell us your name. Give me that ID again.
Giving you the ID, I showed it to you.
So what?
I showed you the ID.
You do what?
I showed you the ID.
Could you let me see the ID again? Huh?
No.
No? Will someone else ask him for the ID? Will you ask him for it? He won't let me see it again. You didn't see it. You didn't see it. They didn't see it.
It's clear that this is not about transparency, not about accountability. This is pure calculated humiliation. This isn't oversight. This is a public shaming ritual designed to break this man down, make him submit, and mark him for public retribution. Waters starts with a classic power move, forcing eye contact. Look at them in the eye. Hold your face up. That's not a request. That's a demand. She's not talking to him like a government worker just doing his job. She wants to force submission, force obedience, and make him feel small. Then she moves on to forcing him to say his name. What's your name? Oh, she knows exactly what she's doing here. This isn't about ID. It's about marking him for retaliation. This moment is being filmed. She knows it's going to go viral, and she wants his name out there. She wants activists, media stooges, and deranged Twitter mobs to know exactly who to go after. And then the pathetic, obsessive demand for his ID over and over and over again. Let me see that ID. Show it to me again. Someone else ask him for it. He won't let me see it. Why? What's the point? She already saw it. But this isn't about identification, it's about domination. She wants him to keep complying, keep proving himself, keep jumping through hoops while she drags out the moment, escalates the situation, escalates the tension, and makes him feel trapped. And I mean, we talked about this. She knows exactly what she's doing. This is all intentional, weaponized harassment. She's not getting in that building today, but she's making damn sure that this man will pay for it later. The goal isn't access. The goal is turning him into the villain, into the face of everything that Democrats are trying to brand Trump's administration as. so that he can get harassed, doxxed, and threatened by the same unhinged activists who treat her like a queen. It's ironic that Maxine Waters loves to play the defender of democracy, but let's be real, this is authoritarianism in real time. When she doesn't get what she wants, she doesn't argue, she punishes. This isn't oversight, this is a public execution designed to make an example out of anyone who dares to say no to her or the Democrat Party. Anyway, folks, at what point do we start recognizing this pattern for what it is? The same people who claim to fight for democracy are the ones weaponizing intimidation, manipulating emotions, and turning individuals into scapegoats whenever they meet resistance. This isn't about justice. It's about power. Who has it, who controls it, and who gets crushed for daring to stand in the way. And yet, how many will still buy into the act? How many will still believe that these grandstanding politicians are the underdogs rather than the enforcers of the very system they pretend to fight? When the powerful demand submission under the guise of righteousness, it's not just a spectacle, it's a warning. The real question is, when they come for the next person who won't play along, will you even be allowed to question it? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.